Thank you, Shannon. That was great. Thank you all. We're excited to be kicking off the new season of webinars for Sloat. As Shannon said, we're going to be talking for probably about 45 minutes to an hour. Feel free, we would love to see where you are coming in from or calling from. So if you wanted to put in the chat what city you live in, we'd love to see it. You can do that now or whenever you want. And then, as Shannon said, feel free to add comments in the chat. And then if you have any questions that you'd like us to answer, the Q&A tool, the Q&A tool is probably the best spot for questions so that we can either answer them individually or we will answer them for the whole group to hear, mostly at the end of the program. So we will do a Q&A at the end, so definitely stick around for that. What we're going to talk about today is why fall season is the best time to add new plants to the garden. And then when you are adding those plants, how to set up your plants for success. So all the tools that we can, and tools and things we can do in the garden to make sure our plants grow healthy and strong. And then we will talk about some prevention, thinking ahead towards spring, things that we can do now to prevent those spring pests. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the Our Water, Our World program. Shannon gave a quick intro, but I'll tell a little bit more about it. So it is a program designed to bring awareness between pesticides and water quality, and we provide pest problem solving education. Yes, it is a mouthful. All focused on less toxic options. So you can find Our Water, Our World materials in over 200 hardware stores and garden centers in several counties across California, and we are expanding. We partner with these stores, these retailers, to provide information to customers and also help out the staff. So in most stores, you'll find a rack, like in the photo on the right, information sheets that are available to you to take about several pests and other garden-related things like taking care of roses. Some stores also have QR code posters, like you'll see kind of in the middle right there. And then many stores also have these blue tags you can see on the bottom. Those are going to highlight the eco-friendly products on the shelf. So you'll be able to know that if you use that product correctly and according to the label, it will be less toxic for the environment and for our waterways. And all the information about the fact sheets, the stores that we partner with, and more information about water quality is going to be at our website, ourwaterourworld.org. We also have an Instagram account at ourwaterourworld. So why do we care about water and pests, and what are we talking about here? So the connection that we are drawing is because we all live in a watershed. A watershed is really any area of land that drains to a body of water. Your yards are watersheds. And then, of course, they get bigger and bigger and they expand out. If you live in the Bay Area in Contra Costa, Marin, or San Francisco, you live in the San Francisco Bay watershed. It is a massive watershed. Half of all the water that lands on the state of California, either in rain or snow, drains into the San Francisco Bay. So when it moves across, from our yards, from farms, through cities, it picks up a lot of material. All that material enters waterways. It is not filtered out of those waterways. It's if it goes down a storm drain, it goes directly to a waterway, and then eventually it makes its way to the bay. And and that's pet waste, litter, plastic, pesticides, fertilizers, motor oil, all of those things, excuse me, will make it to the bay and can cause problems when there's that much of it. So really what we're doing is we're trying to draw the connection between what we're doing outside in our homes, in our gardens, on our streets, and how that can have a direct effect on our waterways. And we do that by mostly focusing on pest management and using less toxic options for our pest management. And we use a strategy called integrated pest management. And what it is more of a holistic view of pest management. So we're kind of looking at the big picture, taking in a lot of information before taking any action. It's also a decision-making process, and we base our decisions on science-based information and strategies. We ask ourselves a lot of questions. What is really the problem at hand is a big one. So that's really identifying what is actually the problem, because a lot of things in our garden will, a lot of things will look wrong, and when we don't want to assume that it's a pest, and we don't want to assume it's maybe an insect. We really want to understand, is it a watering issue, a fertilizing issue, or is it a disease, an insect, something like that? We really want to understand what's happening before we take any action. Also, we want to, kind of understand our thresholds of tolerance. Can we live with it? Some pests are very short-lived and they don't cause a lot of damage. So maybe we can kind of just do a minimal amount of management and let them, kind of move on. And then sometimes, they're causing a lot of damage. We can't get past it. So we want to take some action. Prevention was what we're definitely going to talk about. Prevention today is a really important part of integrated pest management. A lot of things we can do ahead of any pests arriving to prevent them from coming at all, or to really lessen the damage that they'll have. Identification, as I mentioned, extremely important. Integrated pest management. We cannot take action on the problem if we don't know what the problem is. So identifying, is it an environmental issue, or is it a pest issue? And then what kind of pest exactly is it? Then once we've identified it, we can take our action steps. And in integrated pest management, there are 4 types of action steps, or controls they're called. Cultural controls is a lot of what we're going to talk about today, really focusing on the health of the garden. Healthy plants and healthy gardens attract fewer pests. And then if pests do arrive, those healthy plants will be able to fight off any infestations and still stay healthy through it. So really focusing on the health of the garden, making it a good environment for our plants and a less good environment for pests. Mechanical controls are physical things that we can use in the garden and the home. So that could be traps for anything from rodents, yellow jackets, aphids, lots of different kinds of traps. Barriers, we'll talk about some of those barriers today. Physical barriers that will prevent pests from getting to your plants or your home. And then tools, so hand tools, weeding tools. Our hands are also a great tool. Things like that, really physical things that we can do in the garden that require no toxic anything. Then we have biological controls, which is really focusing on the ecosystem of the garden, inviting in the beneficial insects, and supporting the diversity of the garden. Because if we have more diversity in the garden, both insects, birds, and other critters will have fewer pests. They do a lot of pest management for us, and they'll keep those pests down. And then lastly, we have chemical controls, which are pesticides. In IPM, we always use those as a last resort. Sometimes some people decide not to use them at all, which is a perfectly fine way to go. We understand that pesticides rarely solve the problem, but they can help help in certain ways. And we always want to use the least toxic option possible. We are going to always spray carefully and reading the label, and yes, understand what we're doing with those chemicals before we use them. All right, so we're going to talk today about why fall is the best time to add plants. I'm from the East Coast, so I've always thought, and I know it's a very East Coast, Midwestern mentality to think that fall is spring is the great time for planting. Everything's blooming, it's getting warmer, why not spring? But that is very specific to other parts of the country. California has a very unique climate, the Mediterranean climate, with our mild winters and our wetter, hopefully, winters and dry summers. So we need to think differently about planting, and there's a lot of reasons why fall is a great time to do it. So when we put our plants in the ground in fall, what we're doing is really setting them up. We're giving them some time to get settled and get established without extreme conditions. So there's shorter daylight hours. So that means that the sun is not as strong. There's less risk of drying out and burning the plant. There's cooler evening temperatures. So there's still going to be, cool soil, and yeah, Suzanne, you can jump in if I'm saying this wrong, but it's cooler soil and less extreme temperatures. Hopefully in the winter time from, starting in October through the early spring, there will be wetter weather, more rain. So that means that there will be, less watering for us to do. The soil will be wet, moist at least, for many months at a time, and which will allow roots to really expand. We'll talk about that later. It's going to be, if we put our plants in the ground in September, October, November, it's going to be 8 or so months until the heat of the summer that we just experienced in August, September. And then it's also about 10 months until the driest summer season is upon us. So there's still going to be moisture in that soil for that first 10 months that that plant is in the ground. So all of this together will be more time for your plants to become established. Another bonus reason why fall is a great time to plant is because nurseries often have sales. So you can get those nice plants for less money, and they'll be set up for success. So I just wanted to share more about why we're talking about fall, just really demonstrating why it's such a good time to get things in the ground. I have 2 graphs here, San Francisco and Livermore. I know most people are probably from Contra Costa County. Livermore was the closest I could find for that East Bay weather, but East Livermore and Contra Costa are not that far away from each other, and they have similar weather. So these graphs just show, the peak summer, a peak heat usually is in July, August, September. For San Francisco, it's in September, where the temperatures get, usually 75, maybe a little bit higher around there. In Livermore, the peak is usually July, August, where it peaks around 86, although we just experienced significantly higher than that. And then Marin kind of is somewhere in the middle, closer to the Livermore. Temperatures peaking in August around 84 degrees. So again, this is just showing that that's the later summer months is where the temperatures are the highest. So if we get our plants to the ground just after that, where temperatures start to come down in October, we'll have lower temperatures and less extreme heat for those plants to get established. Also, so again, this is the norm. It shows the rainfall. Those green bars show the rainfall starting in October and being consistent through March, maybe April. That's the norm, and that's like, over many years how it's been. Although we've been experiencing in the last 5 to 10 years that rainfall is less consistent and more erratic. It's not as steady, and we've experienced short periods of dryness and also periods of heavy rain, and then warmer winter temperatures, so that we can't really rely on that snowpack throughout the summer, and we really have kind of inconsistent rain throughout. Suzanne, do you want to talk any more about that before we move on?
Oh, well done, Charlotte. Well done.
All right.
Okay. So now I'm going to share, thank you, Charlotte. I'm going to share, how do we set our plants up for success? So Charlotte has outlined why fall is the best time to plant, and specifically with our California climate. But now let's talk about how to set our plants up for success. So we're going to choose native varieties, California native plants that will adapt to our climate with ease and require less water once established. We're going to group plants with similar water needs so that they can grow with optimum health. We're going to water deeply as those plants become established. We're talking about deep root zones. We want to really encourage happy, healthy root zones. And then as those root zones grow and expand, we're going to back off the watering. That means still providing that volume of water, but less frequently, okay? Because we do want those soils to dry out before we water again. We're going to go into each of these points with more detail in a moment. We're going to then provide our seasonal, we're going to maintain our soils and keep them healthy, which Charlotte's going to share more details about that. I'm going to talk a little bit more about when it rains, how important it is to keep that water on site. And there's a couple tips that we can share on how to slow that water, spread that water over our properties, allow it to sink in and allow it to store right where we need it. And then we're going to also discuss a little bit about providing seasonal garden maintenance to keep the plants happy and healthy and to also reduce pest problems. So which plants are best for my garden? We get this question all the time. And let me tell you, everyone has their own aesthetic. Everyone has their own microclimate, which is the key here. What plants, how are they going to respond to your garden areas and so forth? But number one, what we want to do is always choose climate appropriate plants. So we're going to focus on choosing California natives and Mediterranean native plants that can adapt to our summer dry climate. And from there, we're going to ask our nursery professionals for some support around which ones would thrive in our own individual microclimates of our own gardens, because our gardens are different from throughout the Bay Area, but also from like neighbor to neighbor. There's going to be some differences that will allow one plant to thrive in my garden, but maybe won't thrive in my neighbor's garden. So we're going to match those plants to the conditions of the garden, okay? Because when we can, those plants are going to grow with ease and be really healthy. And healthy plants are not going to be stressed and they're not going to be as susceptible to pest problems. And then when we choose plants, we're going to always look at those varieties that are available that are going to be pest and disease resistant. So though my garden is primarily California natives and, climate appropriate, I do have a collection of roses, but I am now more inclined to, when I'm adding a rose to my garden, pick something that's going to be pest and disease resistant. So I wanted to share that with you. And then something that's been really popular, we're happy to share, is so many of the water agencies and the municipalities are offering rebates to, change out your lawn to something that's going to be more water efficient. So we just want to share a couple of our favorite lawn substitutes. By all means, there is a huge list out there, and we're going to show you a couple of resources where you can find those lists. But our favorites are going to be the red fescue and also the meadow grass, this carex. These are two of my favorites that grow really well. They do not need a lot of maintenance once established. You can choose to mow them. You could choose not to mow them. I think they respond well to maybe a quarterly or mowing, so just, ask the garden associates, do a little research and see if these are going to be good lawn substitutes, lawn replacements for you. But then aside from something that looks like turf, Diamondia is probably one of the hardest working plants that is a beautiful lawn substitute. It is gorgeous. It's tightly knitted. It has beautiful little yellow daisy flowers throughout the summer, and it really can thrive. And then another wonderful ground cover, especially for those baking hot areas of the Bay Area, is going to be the creeping thyme. Creeping thyme does respond and grow extremely well with baking hot temperatures. So I just want to share, these are all going to need some water once established, but they will be far less than what a turf lawn would be. And a side note, whatever you can do, please avoid adding artificial turf, because though that might seem like a great solution, it is long-term, big picture, more problematic than just keeping your original turf. And for those of you that are growing food, this is the time. Though we just are experienced crazy triple digits, and we might still get a few more high temperatures and extreme heat, it might seem counterintuitive, but this is the time to start those seeds. We want to get those carrot seedlings in, and those other root vegetables like turnips and radishes and beets. We want to also get our leafy greens going, okay? There's a huge list of winter food crops. This is the time. My favorite book right here is the Golden Gate Gardening book by Pam Pierce. You can get that book at the Slope Garden Center or online. But let me tell you, again, though it might seem like it's too hot, this is the time because of all those reasons Charlotte mentioned at the beginning. We've got shorter daylight hours, cooler evening temperatures, and those cooler evening temperatures are cooling down the soil, which is how these winter food crops, those root zones, are going to thrive. This is a list that we like to share with you of some wonderful resources to find plant lists of climate appropriate plants for your area. The Arboretum All Stars is going to have a list of really tough, hard to handle, can grow in any environment, especially high hot heat and crazy wind. We're going to look at the Arboretum All Stars, the Basco or Bay Area Gardening and California Native Plant Society, Calscape, our local master gardeners. Those are all going to have really wonderful plant lists for just in general or by topic. If we're looking for pollinator garden or trees or, deer resistant, things like that. And then also have a look at your Sunset Western Garden book, and as well go into your local garden centers and ask the associates that are so knowledgeable there. They can help guide you towards plants that are going to thrive in your area. When we are selecting plants, we want to keep in mind where they're going to go in the garden. So I might have a couple places that I want to add a couple plants because I've got some established perennial beds, but I want to understand what are the water needs of that zone. And I'm going to add plants that are going to match not only that the water needs, but also the microclimate needs, such as the sunshade, wind, and heat. We want to really understand how our irrigation systems are, or how our garden is set up through the lens of hydrozoning or through the lens of water needs. Okay. And always follow those needs for the plant that we're adding. It would be really inappropriate for the plant and for you to add something that really requires high water needs to an established area that is all moderate or low water needs, because what's going to happen is something isn't going to work, and it's hopefully just that one plant you added and not the whole established bed. So those are things to keep in mind. And for those of us that have irrigation systems already in place, understand that these systems are not set it and forget it systems. We really want to understand that, okay, maybe the landscapers, when they installed the plants, they installed the irrigation system, and that irrigation time, that schedule was designed for newly established plants that are going to be brand new, just planted, and need to become established. Over that time, we're changing that irrigation to accommodate deeper root systems. So we're going to be watering less frequently, but really maybe offering a longer duration of time to get deeper root systems. If we've got clay soil, we're going to be pulsing that water out. So that's going to maybe be multiple short time frame. So maybe we're just setting it for 5 minutes and then it's off for 5 minutes, then it's on for 5 minutes and off for 5 minutes. It's going to pulse the water so it still can get deep. Then we're not watering again until the top few inches is dried out on established plants. We have seen a lot of water restrictions that the agencies have announced. They might say from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. I want to share the best time to water is in those early morning sunrise hours. So 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. is ideal. We can push it to 7 a.m., but we really want to avoid those evening watering because through the lens of pest management educators, what we see when we're watering at 10 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock at night, snails and slugs are welcome. They're coming in. They're going to start chewing on those moist plants in those moist environments. Earwigs are going to start to move in, and diseases, fungal diseases like black spot and rust can also grow. So we really want to avoid that and look at more sunrise hours. We're always going to inspect our system for leaks, and we're going to switch to drip, switch those pop-ups to convert them to drip irrigation when possible. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But for more information about watering efficiently with irrigation systems, we provided a really awesome program, a webinar that's in the SLOAT library. So have a look at that webinar that we provided last spring.
All right, and then a little bit about using that water to grow a healthy root zone that Suzanne's touched on. So when we're planting our new plants, even the drought tolerant ones, the low water use ones, new plants are little babies. They need a lot more care. So we do need to give them more water. When we go to the garden center and we're reading the little tags on the plants, the water use that it says on the tag is for established plants. I use the baby to adult thing. So established plants. So once they have their healthy root systems in the ground, that's how much water you can give them. But up until that point of establishment, they're going to need more water. And especially when they're super small, they're going to need a very moist root zone. Certain plants, smaller plants, can take 6 months to a year to become established, and then larger like trees and shrubs need 3 to 5 years to become established. So really, it's not just the first 3 weeks it's in the ground. We're really helping this plant expand its root zone and get set up. And so we are going to use that water to expand the root zone. As this picture shows, when it comes out of its 4-inch pot, its root zone is only 4 by 4. But we're going to use that water as we're watering. We're going to water around that 4-inch area, but a little bit more beyond it. And then we're going to make sure we're watering deeply so that those roots can expand out and down. When it has a big, healthy root system, the plant's going to have more access to water deep in the soil. It's going to have more access to nutrients to offer that plant throughout its life. So as our plant grows, again, we're continuing to water it more often as it's getting established, and then we'll taper off over that time. And you can always, feel the soil before you water again. You don't want to just be dumping water on it all the time, but really look at the soil, dig down, feel that soil. If it's still moist, you can wait another day or two to water again. But again, we're using that water to grow that deep root system. So this on the top right picture shows kind of a bird's eye view of a tree and those spidery gray roots coming out. That is the whole root zone. It's bigger. It can be bigger than the tree canopy. So when we're watering it, we're not watering at the base of the plant. We're expanding out. We're going to water at the drip line of the tree, which is the outer edge of the canopy. And this goes for shrubs and small plants as well. We're going to water at the drip line, and then maybe even around outside of that too, to really encourage those roots to go out and down. and watering deeply. So we're really making sure that we're not just giving it a quick sprinkle. That sprinkle is going to dry up real quick. If it stays in that's the top layer of the soil, it's going to dry up real quick. We want to make sure we're getting that water deep down so those roots go down as well. You can see in the bottom left what shallow watering will do. It'll keep those roots near the surface, and then those roots will be much more susceptible to drying out and big temperature swings as well. And then another thing we can do to set our plants up for success is to really focus on the soil. And winter is a great time to focus on the soil because you might not have as many things growing, and you can kind of, it's like a less active time. It can be a less active time in the garden, but it can be a really active time for all the organisms in the soil. You can kind of set them up and let them do their thing over the winter. So the first thing we do to build healthy soil is adding compost, and you can buy some wonderful organic compost at Sloat and other stores, or you can make it in your home, or in your backyard, maybe you can get some from a neighbor. And now compost, just to be clear, is the organic matter that's been decomposed by organisms like bacteria, fungus, worms, and other decomposers. So it's all your food scraps and green waste, etc., and it's decomposed. And it has tons of nutrients and tons of life in it. So added to the soil can have so many benefits. When we're adding that compost to the soil, it improves the soil structure. So it makes sandy soil less, stick together more, so it doesn't collapse as much. It breaks up clay soil so that water can infiltrate easier. It increases water retention in the soil. Compost really turns soil into a sponge. So it can hold on to that water that you're putting in there, and it'll give it to the roots it'll have it available for the roots for a longer period of time. Compost is super full of organisms, like I said, bacteria, fungus, microbes. So adding that compost to the soil will increase the microbiology in the soil. We need that microbiology in the soil because plants cannot live without it. That microbiology feeds your plants nutrients. So it's just like our gut microbiome. If we don't have anything living in our stomachs, we couldn't process our own food. Same thing happening in the soil. Those roots need the microbiology. Compost can also balance pH levels. It also recycles nutrients, the plant matter in your garden going back into the soil. It reduces the need for chemical fertilizers and pesticides, so we won't need as much fertilizer if we're adding nutrients through compost, and our plants are going to be overall healthier because the soil is going to be healthier, so therefore hopefully less pests and hopefully less pesticides. And compost can actually fight off the pathogens and bad bacteria in the soil. So when you're using compost during this fall period, you can mix it into the soil as you're planting. And you can also add top dress, so that just means layer it on the top of the soil around existing plants. Focus it at the drip line of those plants where they're going to get watered so that those nutrients and microbiology can be absorbed into the soil. You can also make a compost tea, which is really mixing compost with water or kind of soaking a tea bag of compost in water and then using it as a liquid fertilizer. But now is a great time to add compost to soil, because if you're really introducing a lot more nutrients and microbiology into your soil now, over the winter, they'll just continue to grow and increase the health of that soil, while you're not necessarily gardening. And then in spring, it'll be very healthy. We can also use organic fertilizers in the garden. Also great, thing to consider in addition to compost. Organic fertilizers are derived from organic matter, from mushrooms, manure, also from compost, kelp, bone, blood meal, fish. They're not derived from fossil fuels, which is one reason why we encourage organic fertilizer. Organic fertilizers do tend to have lower NPK numbers, which I'll talk about on the next slide. But those are the main macro ingredients in fertilizer: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. But they contain micronutrients as well. They have more of a broad nutrition, more nutrition than synthetic fertilizer. And then organic fertilizer is released slowly to your plants. And this is really important because it provides sustainable food for your plants over a longer period of time. So you don't have to apply the fertilizer as frequently, which is great. But also you're basically feeding the soil, and the soil microbiome is eating up that the fertilizer and then feeding those nutrients to your plant when the plant wants it and when it asks for it, as opposed to synthetic fertilizers kind of act like a steroid or a Red Bull or like an energy drink for your plants, where it's like a jolt of energy really fast when the plant's not necessarily ready for it. And that can increase, a lot of growth really fast, which sounds good, but is not necessarily what your plant can handle, and it will stress out the plant. And a lot of that new growth also attracts a lot of pests as well. So we're looking for slow release, sustained food for our plants. And I will just share that all these products on the screen are available at Sloat. Products like the Sure Start or the All Down to Earth All Purpose are fantastic fertilizers to use when planting. They do have a higher P phosphorus number, that middle number, which really helps root zones grow nice and healthy. And we do recommend applying a dry fertilizer when planting. It's really easy to do it then. You can mix it into the soil, put it in the hole where you're putting the plant, and that's going to supply sustained energy for your plant. Whereas liquid fertilizers can be excellent ways to add nutrition later on once your plants are established. And then just a little bit more about the benefits of organic fertilizer. I mentioned they have micronutrients as well. Well, they have more macro and micronutrients, not just that NPK. They have other things that the soil needs, like sulfur, calcium, zinc, copper, manganese, boron, and more. And then I just want to share how to read a label of a fertilizer. So I mentioned NPK. On every fertilizer, there's always 3 numbers on the front. The first one is always nitrogen, the second one is always the phosphorus, and the third one is always potassium. And a great way to remember what they all do: nitrogen helps plants grow up, like the green leafy growth. Phosphorus helps the root growth and helps with blooms as well. And potassium promotes all-around well-being. So up, down, all around is what I use to remember what each of those do. So again, using a fertilizer that's a little bit higher in phosphorus right now when you're planting is going to be really helpful to really grow that root zone throughout the winter. Another way to really help your soil and help your plants is to use mulch. And mulch is really any material spread over the soil surface as a covering. We do recommend organic mulches like bark, wood chips, leaves, lawn clippings, straw, newspaper, any organic material that's going to break down nicely. Mulch can be made of oyster shells, gravel, rubber, landscape fabric as well. We just find that there's not as many benefits to using those mulches. And sometimes those mulches can cause more problems too. So we do recommend the organic mulches. And some of the benefits of organic mulches, that really protects the soil. It's like a little blanket over the soil to protect it. It helps in water infiltration. It helps water get into the soil as opposed to running off the soil. It conserves water by reducing evaporation. So I think you can save something like 20% of water by just adding a 3 or 4 inch layer of mulch on top of your soil. Mulch will keep your soil cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter, which is, important for when we're planting our plants in the fall and winter. We want to protect those roots from freezing, from frost. So if we have that nice thick layer of mulch, it'll keep the soil warmer. And it does keep weeds from sprouting and growing. It creates a habitat for beneficial insects. They like to live in that chunky bark sometimes, and then it reduces soil compaction and erosion by, again, protecting that soil layer and keeping that soil in place. I will say you should always keep the mulch away from the crowns of plants. We don't like to crowd the base of the plant. So always make sure there's some space at the base of the plant. And then if you do get a big delivery, there's, I know a lot of people ask where to get free or cheap mulch. I know the app Chip Drop is a great option, or you just call an arborist and usually they'll dump a nice big truckload of mulch in your driveway, usually for free because they want to get rid of it too. If you don't use that mulch right away in that first day that you get a delivery, it is recommended that you tarp it so that it doesn't blow away and get into our storm drains. And then one more tool for building healthy soil, especially over the winter, using cover crops is a really great way to keep soil covered. Soil does not like to be bare. It will just degrade the soil if it's bare. So if it's not covered with mulch or some sort of cloth, we can use cover crops to really increase the health while keeping the soil covered. So also great way to kind of recharge the nutrients of veggie beds. So if you're in between veggies or you're just not going to use your veggie beds for the next season, planting cover crops like fava beans, clover, vetch, cowpea, soybean. There's lots of different kinds of cover crops. You can even get a mix. Those plants are going to add nutrients to the soil while they're growing, especially nitrogen is a common one. They're going to keep the soil, the microbes in the soil active. They're going to be feeding the soil microbes. They're going to keep the soil together so it's not running off in water or getting blown away. And it's also, a lot of those plants have beautiful flowers that attract beneficials, so you can feed the beneficials throughout the winter as well. And they will improve, overall, they improve soil structure and water holding capacity because they're having active roots in the soil. Always better than bare soil.
All right. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can keep all that precious rainwater on site. So I mentioned a term earlier, slow it, spread it, sink it, store it. This is a campaign that a lot of municipalities are using. We want to slow that rainwater and prevent any rainwater from running off of our properties. We want to spread it out throughout the garden over the soil and pervious surfaces. We want to allow it to sink back into the ground, and we want to store it whenever possible for the future. And preventing runoff. Okay, we don't really think about this, or I certainly never considered this to be an issue. But when we have excessive rain coming down, which we see these very flashy rain events of the last few years, where we have these atmospheric rivers dumping a ton of water, it is really hard for the soil to actually absorb all that water. And we are seeing more runoff than ever before. But we want to consider and try to prevent runoff, because it will, when we can, we're going to reduce overloading the storm drains. Okay, that's number one. Number two, when we can prevent runoff, we're preventing pollutants from contaminating the waterways. And that is in the form of pesticides, any chemicals that we're using around the garden, as well as other things. And when we can prevent runoff, we're also preventing mulch and soil and other debris from running off and clogging those storm drains. And when we can keep that water on site, we're actually keeping our garden happy and healthy. We want to increase the permeable surfaces whenever possible. So decomposed granite without the binder. Okay, so anyone that has played with or used decomposed granite knows a little bit of what I'm talking about. We don't want to add that binder. We really want it just to be that sandy decomposed granite. Gravel and other dried laid materials will allow water to infiltrate into the soil below as opposed to running off. And we want to consider this maybe as a new concept for some of us, or something I never considered before really, was to install a rain garden or a seasonal creek bed. And what this does is it allows any overflow of water that might be coming from the roof or the rain catchment system to it's a little bit of a slight divot. It is not, it's like a very shallow basin. It is not a pond. Okay. But it allows water to stay there, spread out, and slowly over time infiltrate into that soil where it is now able to recharge the groundwater and access deeply rooted trees and shrubs. So it's an excellent way to protect our trees and shrubs by getting them more water on a deeper level for those deep root systems. And it doesn't have to be a rain garden that looks like a pond. It could actually be a creek, or you could have multiple little rain gardens around your property. These are also considered, in some cases, swales, where we're allowing water to move in certain directions and guiding it into other areas of our garden. And when we plant these rain gardens, we're actually going to use California native plants that can handle the wet, rainy season as well as the summer dry season. And some of the best plants for rain gardens are going to be those that can adapt to winter wet and summer dry. This is just a photo of some of my favorites that I have around my garden. But again, looking at that California Native Plant Society list is really going to point you in the right direction. And then providing some fall maintenance around the garden. We should be out in our gardens regularly, but at least seasonally, to check in on what's going on and to tend to our garden. So right now we want to pick up any fallen food crops, such as those apples that have fallen off the tree, or those overgrown zucchinis that we never harvested, and so forth, because these food crops attract pests like yellow jackets, rats, and mice. We're also going to look at, excuse me, cleaning up any diseased plant parts, such as the black spot or rust that might be on my roses, or if I've got shot hole fungus, or if I had peach leaf curl on my nectarines and peaches in the early season. I want to pick up those leaves and I want to dispose of them. I want to get them off site, because those spores, just because the leaves have died off, the spores are still alive and they're still active, and they can spread from the diseased leaf to other plant parts around the garden, so other leaves and other healthy fruit. We want to selectively prune, and what I mean by that is, especially if you've got trees, larger shrubs, and fruit trees, we might over the season have seen some spring shoots or water sprouts. That's what they're called, but they might be the things that look like whips that grew. We want to prune those. I'm not talking about doing a big winter pruning. We're just going to prune off anything that might tear or rip off the plant in a big windstorm, or fall off, break off, and maybe damage a structure such as a shed roof, a house, or a fence. So those are just things we want to be mindful of, is the selective pruning. This might be the last time we're applying on organic fertilizer to the established garden, so we're adding fertilizer at time of planting, but we're also going to go around and apply fertilizer to our fruit trees, our citrus, maybe our perennial vegetables, a bank of raspberries or blueberries, and so forth. And what we do is we will rake or remove the existing mulch We will put some dry fertilizer, sprinkle it out according to the label's instructions, put down an inch or two of compost, and then and then apply a blanket of mulch on top of that. This is always happening at the root zone, not at the crown of the plant. And then we're going to plant cover crops to protect the soil in the garden beds, as Charlotte mentioned. If we are planting these new plants and we happen to get a frost or some type of a freezing event coming up in the winter and we're concerned, we can always just drape a frost blanket or row cover over the plants to protect them during that time. And as I mentioned, irrigation maintenance is really important. It shouldn't be something that we're just doing this time of the year, although this time of the year is when we notice it's very dry out there, and those urban critters like squirrels, raccoons, skunks, possums, and so forth are looking for water. So it's not unusual for them to gnaw off an emitter so that they can access the water. However, I just like to share a broken or missing sprinkler head or an emitter can waste as much as 25,000 gallons of water. And that could be $150 a month during an irrigation season. However, I do believe that that cost is on the low end since this is a couple years old, this stat. And please, for those of you that have pop-up sprinklers, know that there are pop-up sprinkler conversion kits to drip. Very easy to, very inexpensive to purchase, very easy to install and convert. And please, before you go ahead and do that, look and see what rebates might be available for you, because there is money on the table that the municipalities want to provide. So please look at rebates for rain catchment systems, lawn begone and lawn replacements, irrigation efficiency, smart controllers, and switch to drip campaigns.
All right, so we've set our plants up for success. Our new plants are ready to grow their root systems through the winter. But now we're going to look forward to spring, when we know that there are going to be several problem pests coming. We know that we're going to get weeds. It's just definitely going to happen if assuming we get rain, which we hopefully will. There will be, gophers are an all year round pest, but we do want to talk about how to prevent them now. Raccoons are a problem kind of now and through into the spring. And then we'll talk about mitigating spring insects and diseases with a dormant spray. So a great low effort way to manage our weeds, which I know is always the biggest stress for a lot of people, is to consider sheet mulching. Sheet mulching is really mulching in layers using newspaper or cardboard, which is preferred, in addition to mulch, to really smother whatever's below it. So that could be a lawn if you're doing a lawn conversion, or it could be a large area of weeds. It's also a great way to regenerate soil in unused areas. So if you know you have a kind of a patch, just like, nothing's going to grow, but you might want to grow there soon, over this winter period, sheet mulching is a great, again, low effort way to add nutrients to the soil, so that by springtime it will be ready for planting. And then, so as the cardboard or the newspaper breaks down underneath the mulch, it will feed the soil over time. And again, we're always protecting the soil. I can't say that enough. Soil likes to be covered, and it's better for your soil to be covered. So if we can cover it with cardboard and some nice organic mulch like bark or wood chips, it will overall lead to healthier soil. So this is kind of step-by-step to do the sheet mulching. This is, a lawn conversion, but it can be for, there doesn't have to be anything there, or it can be weeds or whatever you're trying to get rid of. So you can leave the lawn in place. You do want to cut around the edges. If there's like lawn going up to a curb, you will want to cut back. that a little bit just to account for the increased height of the area, but you don't have to remove the lawn. You can just leave it there. You will mark where you have, if you have any sprinkler heads, you do want to mark that so you don't accidentally cover them with cardboard. Then you're going to layer your cardboard. You can either buy a nice roll like this in this picture, or I recommend reaching out to neighbors, go on Nextdoor or Craigslist. I've done this, and there was literally someone with like an entire garage full of cardboard, and they said have at it for free. So there's a lot of very cheap ways to get your cardboard. You want to layer at least 3 layers of cardboard, really making sure it's overlapping by a lot. And then you can put your mulch on top of that, at least 3 to 4 inches of mulch. You can also add a layer of compost below the cardboard. That's especially good if you do plan to plant in there soon, or if you are just trying to regenerate that soil. That is an option, though that's a choice. So if you want to plant, you can plant directly into your sheet mulching. You don't have to wait for anything to break down. As you are doing it, you can make holes in the cardboard and put your plants right in there. We do recommend using at least 1 gallon size plants or larger. If they're any smaller than that, like a 4-inch, they're going to get lost in the depth of the new mulch. So you do want to use a bigger plant. You can spot amend, so dig that hole, put that compost or organic fertilizer into the hole and put in your plant. You do again want to remember that there's going to be 3 to 4 inches of mulch on top. So you want to make sure you're not burying the plant. You want your plant to be a little bit higher up so it doesn't get smothered. And then you're going to water it deeply. And so you can also just water individual plants throughout the winter time, and you won't water the whole area, which would reduce the stimulating of weed growth. All right, and then so that sheet mulching was like for weeds and for getting rid of a lawn. Now we're going to talk about gophers. And so the reason we're talking about gophers now, especially, well, they are kind of an all year round pest, unfortunately. They definitely are very active in the spring. But I really want to talk about them now is because we are encouraging you to put plants in the ground now. And what I can say is that if you don't have gophers yet, you will. Everyone in the Bay Area has them or will have them. So the best way to manage gophers is with prevention. So if you're putting plants in the garden now, I highly recommend considering gopher baskets. You can either buy them from a store pre-made, or you can make them out of 1/2-inch hardware cloth. This is going to protect the root zone from the gophers. Gophers do come, they live below the ground. They come up a little bit and they'll create mounds in the soil, but they mostly eat plant roots. So they can even just pull your plant down into a hole if they are really hungry. So having gopher baskets, which is wire below the soil surface between the roots and the gophers, will protect that root zone, especially as your plants are getting established. If you're installing raised beds, you're going to want to line that raised bed all the way up the side. You want to do all the way up the side and across the bottom, and really secure it with 1/2-inch hardware cloth. That's the size that we can keep gophers out. There's more information about gophers and identifying between moles, voles, and gophers on our fact sheet, our Water Our World.
And what we see is raccoon activity start to become a little bit more apparent, especially as we get closer to October. So this is the best time of the year, September, right before our soil temperatures start to cool down too much, to apply beneficial nematodes to the soil to combat and take care of those lawn grubs or soil grubs that are there. This is what the raccoons, the moles, the skunks, are going for. They are going for those grubs. So if we can remove that food source, then we're going to see less activity. What I'd like to share is that raccoons are very smart, and you've applied your beneficial nematodes and you do not have grubs. However, if they had found grubs successfully last year or the year before, they remember, and they're going to come to your garden and they're still going to look. So even though you might not even have grubs because you were very diligent and you took care of getting rid of them, you might still see raccoon activity. So that is why it is very important to, in addition to removing those grubs with beneficial nematodes, you might want to also add some type of a barrier, such as poultry wire or bird netting. So bird netting isn't as easy to work with. Sometimes it is less expensive, but it's hard to unfold and fold it back up. What I've found is I get a dowel or a piece of PVC and I roll my bird netting up and I can unroll it. It's a little bit more ease. Okay. Poultry wire, it's flat. It can lean up against the side of a garage or some plywood or somewhere like that. It's very inexpensive. And that is also easy to use. You are going to want to tack the sides of the whatever the barrier is with some landscape pins, or put down something like cinder blocks, or weight it down. In addition, we want to always remove any type of food sources. We do not want to get the wildlife, these urban critters, accustomed to coming to our house knowing they're going to get a free meal. So if we've got pets and we're leaving that pet food out all day, please avoid doing that, because we're just causing more of a problem. Oh, and here is a picture of beneficial nematodes. You can get more information at your slote. And the last pest problem I want to talk about for prevention is dormant spray. We are very close to dormant spray season. It's right around the corner. This is going to be for any of your plants that actually lose their leaves in the wintertime. So this is going to be fruit trees like apples, peaches, plums, not citrus, and roses. Fruit trees and roses are the common plants that will take on a dormant application of a pesticide. Dormant sprays are going to be a little bit stronger, or a stronger mixing solution. So if there were leaves on the plant, those leaves would be phytotoxic to the chemical. We are always going to read the label and apply according to the label's instructions. We are always going to read the label and make sure that pest that we are wanting to treat is on the label, because if that pest isn't on the label, that's not the right product. Dormant sprays will smother overwintering insect eggs. That would be for like the horticulture oil. Horticulture oils are for insects, and the coppers are going to also smother fungal spores. That is going to be, copper is for the diseases, and some plants might require to receive 3 applications, such as peach leaf curl. What you want to also refer to is the UCIPM website, which will map out with more detail the frequency of having to spray. And you can also understand that once the buds have popped open and you're seeing a petal color, dormant season is over. So rule of thumb is Thanksgiving, New Year's, and Valentine's Day. But if Valentine's Day we are already seeing bud break, then dormant season is over. And we've just got one more slide and then we're done. Sorry, we've gone over. We've got more online resources. So of course the UC IPM website, which I just mentioned, which is this incredible database, the searchable database of lots and lots and lots of pests. You can look at them by plants, the pests of certain plants, all the pests that might occur, wildlife identification and so forth, weed identification and so forth. We also have the Our Water, Our World website, which we've mentioned quite a bit, that has the fact sheets that will really outline pest management with ease. And then if you have an insect in your garden and you're not sure if it's a pest or not, please take a picture of it and send it to bugguide.net. This is the Iowa State University resource, which is amazing, because if we can't identify the insect, We don't know if it's a pest or not. And then the National Pesticide Information Center will also provide you with more support on how active ingredients of those pesticides work. So though it might be an eco-friendly product like neem, there are still some cautions we want to take. So that's where the National Pesticide Information Center comes in play. And I'd just like to thank you all, for those of you that are still with us. Sorry that we did go over. This was our kickoff first webinar of the season, and we are a little rusty. So, and it's also kind of, after that week of excessive heat, now we've got some overcast skies. I don't know. Maybe I didn't have enough caffeine, but we just want to thank you so much. We are always love joining Sloat with these webinars and providing you with this helpful information. And we are here to answer any additional questions. And just know that this is recorded and will be on the Sloat website in the library of recorded webinars. So thank you so much.